Hey, how you doing? Welcome, everyone. My name is Jamil Jude. I'm the artistic director here at Kenny Leon's True Colors Theater Company. On behalf of everyone on stage at True Colors, just want to say welcome. Welcome to our community conversation. You know, we've been having several of these over the last several weeks, and we are so glad that you are tuned into this one because this one is going to be one of the best ones that we've had yet. You know, at True Colors, we say we thrive at the intersection of artistic excellence and civic engagement. And there is no other program that epitomizes that intersection like our community conversation series. You know, through our community conversation programming, we try to find the best and brightest scholars and artists that are speaking to what we are feeling here in the moment. And right now, we are really thankful to be partnering with the Atlanta Opera on this conversation. Our friends over at the Atlanta Opera know just how important Black voices in classical music are. So today, we're thankful that they are joining in with us. Our community conversations are made possible thanks to our friends at Brian Cave Leighton Paisner. So thank you to BCLP, all of our lawyers over there. I say it all the time. It is good to have some lawyer friends. So thank you, BCLP, for all of that work. Uh, I mentioned our partner, the Atlanta Opera, and I just want to give you a quick taste of their mission because it really brought a smile to my face. Their mission is to build the major international opera company that Atlanta deserves, absolutely, with a vision to reimagine the opera. We are thrilled to partner with the Atlanta Opera, not only for this conversation tonight, but also for the Concert for Unity that you'll have two opportunities to see this weekend. It is an outdoor concert featuring some of these great Black classical singers that you'll hear today, as well as some other special guests, really highlighting the spoken word and the word through voice, through these amazing vocal performers. While the Mother's Day concert at the Southwest Arts Center is already sold out, there's still availability, last time I checked, for the Cobb Energy Center performance. So please head over to the Atlanta Opera's website at atlantaopera.org for tickets for that concert. It is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening's conversation, Dr. Maurice Wheeler. He is an associate professor in the College of Information at the University of North Texas. Shout out to Denton, Texas. He is an active nationally and internationally as an author and presenter on the topic of African Americans in opera, and he has served as the archivist for the National Opera Association and is currently the co-curator of the Metropolitan Opera's current exhibit, Black Voices at the Met. You have an opportunity to meet Dr. Wheeler here in a second, but let me first introduce tonight's panel. Tonight's panel includes a truly distinguished group of classical singers and scholars, starting with Dr. Uzi Brown. I also want to welcome Maria Clark, Ms. Ronita Miller, and Mr. Morris Robinson. Ms. Ronita Miller and Morris Robinson are company members of the Atlanta Opera, and we are thankful for all of our panelists' inclusion in this conversation today. Before we get to our panel and Dr. Wheeler, we have to give you some art. Like I said, we thrive at the intersection of artistic excellence and civic engagement. So before turning it over to our amazing panel, I'd like to play for you Mr. Robinson's performance of The Impossible Dream, which is part of the Atlanta Opera.
That one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable star.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this community conversation on the arts, Black Americans in classical music and access. Morris, it's always a delight to hear you sing, and seeing you on the stage of the Fox Theater brings back a lot of memories for me. I believe seeing you there brings up memories of inspiration, and also thoughts of our legacy, the legacy of African American classical musicians. The first time that I was at the Fox, I attended a performance by Matty Wilder Dobbs singing with Nikolai Gedda in a performance of Pearl Fishers. At the time, I was not aware that Matty Wilder Dobbs' father refused to let his daughters attend the Fox when they were children because of the segregated seating. I think if I had known that, the performance would have had even greater poignancy for me. In fact, Matty Wilder Dobbs refused to sing in her hometown of Atlanta because the venues were segregated, and she refused until they were integrated. And this video has caused me to think a lot about the early musicians in my life, the African American musicians in my childhood. So I'd like to ask all of our panelists to talk about the early access to classical music in their lives, particularly the classically trained African American people in their community, and what inspiration those people were for them, and whether any of those African American classical musicians actually mentored them in their youth. I'll call on Dr. Yuzi Brown to start.
Good evening. It's certainly a pleasure to be here with such a distinguished panel of singers and scholars. And I am pleased also to be able to participate in a dialogue on, I think, what is an extremely important subject, and that has to do with Blacks in classical music and access from both the perspective of the stage as well as the audience. I could certainly understand Matty Wilder Dobbs' frustration. As a matter of fact, I knew her well. She was, in fact, a mentor to me when she worked at Spelman College, and I had the pleasure of working with her in addition to having sung for her 90th birthday celebration. She was right here in Atlanta at Canterbury House, and I was so pleased to be able to be involved in that. But the circumstances regarding the issues at the Fox are certainly ones that are known for those who have been around the city for any length of time. From its very opening in 1929, the Fox Theater simply clearly had no interest in allowing access to people of color. There was a section that was the colored entrance that required that people of color had to go through a back entrance of the Fox Theater up 8 stories on the outside of the building in order to get to that very small section that provided access for people of color to see performances, even when the performers on stage were African American. And not only was this troublesome, it was a concern of many of the civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King, who during the time that he was alive protested vociferously, as did Mrs. Coretta Scott King, who was very much instrumental in opening access to more Blacks in the audiences and on stage in the city of Atlanta, not only at the Fox, but certainly later at the Civic Center. And the situation with the Fox did not change really until after it was in peril and closed its doors and then reopened in the 70s. Because that argument regarding access and civil rights went on well into the 60s. And the Metropolitan Opera actually began to present in 1969 at the Civic Center, and the Fox was about to close its doors. So the history there is not great. However, post 1974 and so forth, like Dr. Wheeler, I had the pleasure of seeing so many performances there from Leontine Price, as well as Matty Wilder Dobbs. I saw Patty Austin there, Duke Ellington Band, had the pleasure of seeing both of the Hines brothers. So it was really wonderful to be able to be in that beautiful facility. But just the thought of so many years of being deprived from really experiencing the full breadth of that hall is something that should be concerning even now in terms of the history of that facility that was begun in 1929.
Right. I know, Morris, you have spoken about your father's comments and telling you about the history of the Fox. So could you tell us a bit of that story?
Yeah, the piece that, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be a part of this discussion. And, I'm a native Atlantean, so I'm born, raised, Ben Hill, Zone 4, went to Fickett Elementary School, then Sarah Smith, then Sutton Middle School, Northside School of the Arts. So I'm Atlanta born and bred. And I talk in this series with Atlanta Opera about how on Sunday afternoons after church, we would take rides through Atlanta. My dad would show us things. And one of the things he always pointed out was the Fox Theater. And just as Dr. Brown pointed out, there was a black staircase on the side of the building. My dad said, these are the stairs we used to have to take to go see shows here, and we'd have to sit in the balcony. And I was a kid, and I just, it came across as just that's how things were, I guess. I was too young to really understand the enormity of what I just heard from him. But I guess the full circle irony of it was when I was about 12 years old, I was part of a show that was taken to the Fox Theater. I got a chance to sing on that stage in the chorus with my sisters, and we did It's a Hard Knock Life from Annie. It was a multitude of different Broadway tunes, etc. And I got a chance to sing on that stage then, and I could not understand the emotion of my parents seeing their kids actually perform on the stage, and they got a chance to walk through the front doors. But that history isn't something that escapes us, and I'm very well aware of it because my dad, told me about it. And to be able to sing on that stage now and sing this song, "The Impossible Dream," almost makes the whole thing come full circle, But it's interesting that it wasn't. I didn't know this, Dr. Brown, that it wasn't until they were in financial peril that they decided to do the right thing, and that's. It's funny how some things change and some things never do. So, yeah.
Right. I'd like to ask Maria Clark and Ronita Miller to talk about the early influences in their lives regarding classical music and the people who may have been influential or mentored them during those early years.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wheeler. It's an honor to be here for me as well. My early access was very nominal, very small door of access. Like Morris, I am originally from Georgia, but I'm from 70 miles southeast of Atlanta from the countryside. The city that I'm from, Eatonton, is number 3 in dairy country, the number 3 dairy city in Georgia. And the only landmark that I can use is I'm just very proud of the fact that Alice Walker is from my town, and I use her as a landmark. But the access was not there for me, just not only because, of being African American, but also because of location. The first person who was influential to me and made me want to just know everything that I could about music, period, was Lithonia Bennigan. She was my first music teacher in kindergarten, and I was in her group called the Singing Angels, and she was African American, and I saw her play the piano, and she's just floating over the keys, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, and she looked like me. And I say, my gosh, this is a woman who she's Black, and she's playing this instrument like just a goddess. And it made me want with everything in me to learn how to play the piano. So she was I call her my musical mama. And she was the first one to influence me to want to study music. She unfortunately was so busy because she was so sought after in our community that she didn't have a lot of time to teach private lessons. But the first piano lessons that I had was from an 80-year-old Scottish man, straight from Scotland, who somehow found his way retiring in Eatonton. And he introduced me really to the world of classical music. And not only did he teach me piano, he introduced me to all the great singers, and he would play recordings, and he had me watch, operas from the Metropolitan Opera House. He would play Fats Waller, Leontine Price, uh, Itzhak Perlman, and I had no knowledge of that music from where I was from because the arts were just not prominent in that small dairy town that I was from. And the art still is not prominent there today. So is extremely important, for church and for the public schools and the music and the arts in the public schools to introduce the arts to children, particularly those who don't have access to metropolitan areas and also to African American children.
Right. That's great. Ronita Miller?
Well, I am not a Georgian. I'm a Floridian. I knew it was coming. My parents moved up here about, I'm going to say six years ago. And I am recently back here in the States. And my first influences as far as Black classical musicians didn't come well until I was in high school. I had no desire to be a musician. I wanted to be a scientist. And when I was in high school, there was my chorus teacher said, you should try out an audition for the Florida State University classical music camp. It's a week-long camp up in Tallahassee. And I thought, okay, that sounds cool. And while I was up there, I think the late, great Andre Thomas, I don't want to say late, great, because I might be wrong. Dr. Andre Thomas, who taught chorus at Florida State University. When I was up there, he handed me a tape and he said, I want you to listen to this. And I was like, okay. On that tape was a recording of the Jesse Norman, Kathleen Battle, Spirituals in Common. Thank you. I was like, I don't want to say late because I think I'm wrong. Thank you. Thank you. And he gave me this tape and I went home and I listened to it. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And from there, I went and studied more, found out about Leontine Price, listened to her obsessively, and went from there. I did not have knowledge really in my childhood of Black classical musicians until I ended up in chorus in high school. And then I was very, very fortunate to work in my first year of university with a Black teacher, Miss Annetta Monroe, who just recently passed away, and also with Felicia Weathers, who did a residency there. So it was just really a crash course in the best sense of knowing that this is something that I can do, and seeing that representation really meant a lot because it just wasn't on the radar at the time.
So I think what's so amazing about this assemblage of performers is that performers and scholars is that we all have different backgrounds, but we have all sort of come to the same place. And I know, Morris, you have a very interesting beginning story in your musical life. Do you want to tell us a bit? I think you're muted.
Sure. I didn't do chorus in high school, in middle school, elementary school. I went to Northside High School of Performing Arts, and I didn't join the chorus until I found out that you couldn't be in the band and play football. So I quit the band and joined the chorus so I could play football. That's a long story. But while I was in the chorus at Northside, one of my football teammates was Wendell Whalum Jr. And one of your predecessors, Dr. Brown, if I'm not mistaken, from an illustrious faculty member at Morehouse. And he heard me sing a concert with the Mozart Requiem with his songs in the chorus. He walked up to me and said, I don't hear a voice like yours very often. He gave me the whole speech about what, how special this could be. And, because of lack of access, because I didn't know very many people that looked like me that did this for a living, I never saw it as a viable option. So we talk about access, you know. So, but what I did see was the Atlanta Falcons and the Georgia Bulldogs and Georgia Tech, and I saw that as something I wanted to do. I saw that as something that was within the scope of possibility for me. So instead of pursuing music out of high school, which I went to, you know, I had all the solos and the Mozart Requiem, the Haydn's Creation. I did all these things in high school, but I went on a football scholarship, and I didn't come back to music until the age of 30. But classical music was really introduced to me at Northside High School, and the first Black person that I saw that was interested in me in that regard, from a real official capacity, was Dr. Wendell Whalen. So, and I came back to that. And I think that's one thing that we always do is you never get too far away from it. If it's in you, the music has to come out. So at the age of 30, after being in corporate America and doing a few things, I came back and started studying opera at the age of 30. And at that point in time, I started really clamoring, trying to find anyone that looked like me that I could emulate, that I can take notes from, that I could to get information from. And just so happens, luckily, my first year studying music at Boston University, I got into St. Louis, Opera Theater St. Louis, and we were doing Premonition. And that's where I met Kevin Short, and I met Larry Brownlee, and I met Marcia Porter down at Florida State, and I met Dara Raming, and I met, Russell Thomas. We were all there together. And that kind of gave me the synergy to understand that, we do this and we can do this. And I felt like I had a support system. So that was my entry into it.
That's wonderful. The next question I want to start with Dr. Brown on, because I know he has a connection to this and certainly an opinion about it. Most Black Americans have deep connections and deep roots in churches, if not religiously, certainly culturally. And so I'm wondering, with the proliferation of gospel in Black churches, are Black churches still the incubators and pipeline for Black classical singers as they have been historically?
I think there has been an evolution, and part of the discussions that I've been engaged in over the last 10 years or so has been, the relevance of certain aspects of African American music, particularly in terms of classical genres in the Black church and within the Black community. I think it's still an important center. The Black church has always been the hub for social, political, cultural kinds of activities. And at one point, it was about the only place that was a venue through which African Americans could express their art. They were closed from so many other places. And I will tell you, it was that kind of church nurturing that gave me my launch into the field of music. I have never been far from the Black church for that reason. As a matter of fact, 40 years at least of my professional life, I've been in some of the most active churches, including almost 13 years at Historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, at Ben Hill, Cascade United Methodist. They all continue to do certain things that I think are extremely important in terms of maintaining or sustaining the life of classical music, but not to the extent that was the case in earlier days, because I think we have too many alternatives. I won't say too many, but we certainly have a lot of them. And one aspect of this is the general age of popularism that is not only in the Black church, but it's throughout the country. Popular music and that which is commercially viable has flooded our churches and communities and so forth, to the extent that it does not make the kind of room that used to be relevant for the growth and perpetuation of certain other aspects of culture. And then there are those who reject really essentially anything that is of the Western European classical or art music tradition, which I have serious problems with. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I'm about inclusiveness. I think it's important to understand that even through the mouthpiece of our jazz artists and others, many of those foundational things that constitute how we speak in terms of our musical language are influenced by some foundational things that are affected by Western European musical traditions. I learned to apply theoretical concepts to something that I had done as a child just by improvising, but I found a language for that. And the reason I have been and continue to write and I'm fascinated with composition is because it gave me a language through which I could, in fact, express my musical ideas.
Right. Thank you. Other comments about this topic? Morris?
Yeah, I think that the church still is, our musical home. It's. I went to a place last night, to a venue, to hear one of my church musicians that I played with, Ricky Jordan, play the drums. He was like the little guy that waited for me to leave so he could play drums next. And in the Black church is always the guy sitting in the wings, watching and learning, and just absorbing and then producing. And I always like to tell people, however, and by the way, there were 3 other musicians playing in this jazz band that all played in my church, Israel Baptist Church in Decatur, Georgia, in Kirkwood. But I do think that what Dr. Brown said is very legitimate, that the popularization of and having an avenue, a viable choice with gospel music being more mainstream, and then that branching out to other genres, that we are kind of usurping the talent that we could have in classical music because it's not being presented as a viable option. I think that you can go to church on Sunday at any given church and probably find another Ronita Miller, or another Morris Robbins, or another Maria Clark, in the alto section or the tenor section. We got countertenors all throughout the Black church. They sing on Sundays and they sound like, they do the quartet singing. We have wonderful, there's an Omneris, I'm sure, going to be singing on Sunday morning. We've been looking for a Black one. They're there, but it's about, again, access and awareness. And I think that that's what we're missing, but I think the talent is still there. It's just, like you said, it's being pulled in so many different directions.
Right. I think we're going to take a break in just a moment. We're going to take a sneak peek behind the scenes of the Atlanta Opera's productions of Carmen and Three Penny Opera. I think they're queuing it up in just a moment, but I certainly agree that the talent is still in the churches, and the opportunities are still there. And I think it's incumbent upon those of us who are connected to classical music to expose the communities that we're connected to that opportunity. I believe the video is ready.
When the shark bites with those teeth, dear, scarlet billows start to spread. The fancy gloves, though, wears my Keith, baby, so there's not a trace of red on the sidewalk. Sunday morning lies a body just oozing life. Someone sneaking around the corner. Could that someone be Max the Knife?
Wonderful. I think we will shift our conversation now a bit towards performing and performing opportunities. We all know that access to training programs post-graduation is extremely important for singers or for musicians who are preparing themselves for careers. So I'd like for you to talk about the role and the kind of training that has been significant either in your own careers or in the careers of your students that have made a really big difference for you. And we'll start with Ronita Miller.
Yeah, I think the training, I'm going to say that I did a lot of school because I started with music quite late and started college early. So I was in college by the time I was 15, and was still trying to figure out, did I want to be a musician? And I think the training when I was in university, even getting my graduate degree, I was still trying to figure out what was going on. And it wasn't until I got to Juilliard where I was able to attend school with cross-disciplinary students, acting students, dance students, and figuring out that it needs to be a whole package. You need to be a musician as well as an interpreter of text and a storyteller. Um, and then getting the onstage experience, particularly at LA Opera, which is my first young artist program, was so important to put those things, the theory, into practice. And after that, going to another country and being on stage every day and just practicing your craft was important. And it was difficult because I did not get auditions in a lot of places. But what I got, I took every piece of information that I could get, and I learned. And those last years of post-grad school and being in a FEST program really, really helped to solidify and make me feel comfortable in who I am as a performer, knowing what I have, knowing my niche, and knowing what I need to improve upon by watching my friends and colleagues, and just really, becoming still a fully formed artist, the artist that I am. Was that the question? I hope it was.
Yes, it was.
I answered it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, Maria Clark, will you respond either in your own singing or those of your students?
Yes. For my own singing, I knew that music was what I wanted to do from the beginning. I started out at Florida State, full scholarship. First 2 years there, I loved Florida State, but I did not love Tallahassee because of the only thing that was there for me was just the colleges. It was FAMU and Florida State, and that was it. And the rest of the town was just, black and white. And it was just a slow moving town. I was like, this is not what I signed up for. I'm from this kind of town, and this is what I was trying to escape. So then I had always wanted to go to New York. So then I transferred to Manhattan School of Music. And that was really in New York, just being there and, all the culture, all the arts, and being in a conservatory where I could focus and hone in on just music and not study about platelets in the earth, in the university. We would eat, breathe, sleep, drink music. And I was just in my element. And it was a lot of friendly competition at Manhattan School of Music. And that's where I feel like I really came into my own performance-wise. We also would ditch class and go up to Juilliard and, go to, I remember once we ditched class and went up to a Leontine Price master class at Juilliard. and all the New York's finest in the classical world came out for it. You had Grace Bumbry there, Martina Arroyo came out, and so many others. And we got to talk to Leontine Price. And Leontine Price actually kissed me on my cheek. And I don't think I washed that side of my face for 3 days. And it was just amazing. And that really kind of opened my world to performing and knowing that was really what I wanted to do. As far as some of my other students, I have some who have gone on to programs in musical theater, and they're in colleges and they're doing very well. And those are the ones who are just very serious, and their parents are very serious about supporting them. And that's so important. And I have one who comes back to me every summer. She still studies year round, when classes are out. And I know she's just going to be so successful. I have some who are, one who is, has his own record company and is under the Sony label. And, it's just wonderful to see. And they really, one thing that's in common, that they all have in common is that the work ethic and the motivation and the desire, that can't be taught. They're driven and they want it and they work at it. So, they are the ones who go out there and just go for it. And you really have to do that. When you have that desire, you just go out there and go for it and you see where the chips fall. So, yeah.
You're right. The work, you can have the desire, but you also have to put the work in.
Absolutely.
I know that Morris, you have experiences at the Met in the training program. I'd like to hear about that, but I'd also like for you to talk a bit about the differences in early careers of singers in America and the differences in Europe. Tell us about the FEST system in Europe and how that prepares singers differently, and also how singers who have had a FEST experience in Europe come back to America positioned differently than other singers.
So I'll go backwards. I'll start with what you started with.
Okay.
And I will segue the FEST from the best of my knowledge and transition right over to Ronita Miller, who actually lived that life. But
right.
I was very blessed to be able to go to Boston University Opera Institute. And while there, I worked with some of the best coaches in the Northeastern area. And I got a chance to work with Stephen Lord, who was the music director of Boston Lyric Opera, who started giving me jobs almost immediately. Within 2 weeks of me starting studying music, I was singing the King and Aida with Boston Lyric Opera. And this is called baptism by fire, being thrown right into the throw of things. And, I put my whole life on hold to do this. So that work ethic that you talk about, Maria, that desire, that putting in the time and sacrifice, I did those things, but I was also in very, very capable hands. I think that's important, getting the proper training from the right type of people. So my next stop was right into the Met Young Artist program after being at BU for a year and a half. And now you're working with the best coaches in the world. Now, I'm completely green. I don't know anything, but I think that Maestro Levine, God rest his soul, personally brought me into the program because he heard the natural gift, and he admonished everyone that you will work with this guy and teach him everything that he needs to know. And then it becomes a matter of, like you said, putting in the time, putting in the work, and just working overtime to make sure that you meet the level of expectation. One thing I heard when I was at BU was that James Stevens was working with, Denise Graves is also from BU, and he says that one of the things about her is she will practice all night to get a syllable right. She stay up late to study the text. She do all these things. And I was like, I want to be like her. This is my example of someone that can come out of this program and make it. And he told me the things that she did to make it. She put in the time. She put in the work ethic. She worked on her pronunciation. She worked on her text. She worked on translations. She did all the work. So then from hearing that, I just patted myself after that because I wanted to get to that level. As far as the festing system, I can't speak too intelligently about it, but I've worked with lots of people that have. I feel as though what Ronita said and Maria said is about being on stage and having opportunities to do the craft is the best teacher. And when you're in a fest situation, which I'm not firsthand familiar with, I do realize that people show up from over there prepared linguistically, prepared stylistically, working in a house where the native tongue is German. Your German is going to be impeccable when you show back up because you learn how to speak it. You learn the natural flow of the language. That's something that we don't get in America, but they get, people get in the fest contracts over there, fest situations. So same thing with Italian, same thing with French. So I think that the level of artistry, you're totally immersed in it. So I think that's a wonderful way. And unfortunately, that has also been one of the few routes that African-American singers had to take in order to make it back to these stages. Not everyone was blessed with the opportunity to sing on the stages right out of their academic training. So they went to Europe where they were a little bit more open-minded about casting and got their footing, and then came back to America, very polished artists and respected because they've been on those stages. So we can't factor that out of the equation. I've said enough. Ronita, if you don't mind me, Dr. Wheeler, maybe she has a little bit more to talk about when it comes to the festing because yes, you live that life.
Sure, I'd like you also, Ronita, to address the exposure to different kinds of literature and the experience of being able to sing different kinds of literature and sort of figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Because few people have had the ability to sing Wagner early in their career, and I'd like to talk about that part of the experience.
Yeah, so as Morris said, there was sort of an element of needing to go to Europe to gain stage experience and I was very fortunate in the Young Artist program at LA Opera that Maestro James Conlon put me into everything he could get me into. And I mean, every time there was a part that he thought I could sing, he was just like, "You're going to do this." And he would coach me. He's like, "You're going to do quickly. You need to learn Verdi. You need to learn the pacing, the language. Do this. Sing at the May Festival, ... And I am forever grateful for that because, had he not done that, I don't know that I would have gotten so many opportunities being a large Black woman in the United States. It's very hard to be cast in a lot of things. And then I ended up directly from the LA Young Artist program auditioning for Sir Donald Runnicles for The Ring in San Francisco at 29 years old. So that was like a huge crash course because, being cast in Wagner in like 27 years old was the first time that I had ever done anything. And from there, I was able to go over and do Fest. And it was a very eye-opening experience because I got to sing things there that I would never have been able to sing in the States. Repertoire, amassing huge amounts of repertoire, singing Rossini, singing Wagner, singing Mozart, singing Verdi, and being able to rely on the technique that I learned so that I can sing repertoire like that. One day Mozart, the next day Verdi. It's really a crash course, and you have to have your wits about you. You have to be a solid singer. You have to be a quick study with language. And coming back to the States, even though it was during the pandemic and I hadn't planned on it working that way, made me realize that so often when you're coming up as a young singer in the United States, and there are so many good singers and oftentimes not so many places because, the United States does not operate on a fest system or repertoire houses where they have a house ensemble. That is changing in a few places. Having that experience of working every day and being totally immersed in a new culture where culture is the norm, where performance is the norm, and doing that every day makes you calm down about yourself, and it makes you say, okay, you know what? I've done the trial by fire. I know who I am. It teaches you a lot about who you are. It teaches you a lot about what you sacrifice for the art form, being away from family, learning a new culture in a different language. It just is kind of the polishing of a diamond, refining. It refines you in a lot of ways. And I never thought I would end up in Europe singing, but I am forever grateful for the fact that I was there for so long, 7 years. And yeah, I think houses could benefit and young singers could benefit from houses having ensemble like systems here in the States.
Oh, absolutely. I think that regardless of what our goals are, I think being put through the refiner's fire is really, really important. And Dr. Brown, I'd like to respond to this question to start. we know that not everyone will have the ability to go to New York and experience the training programs at the Met, or to go to even some of the other opera companies in the country, or to go to Europe. What kind of guidance do you give to students or people who clearly have career potential, but don't have either the ability or the desire to relocate? How do you guide those people to hone their craft where they are?
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Will. And let me say, and this is partly related to the previous dialogue, and I want to begin by saying there is no substitute for good musicianship, and there is no substitute for good technical training, regardless to what one decides they're going to do. And I have encouraged my students over the years to decide what they want to do in terms of their careers, but to make sure that they have the foundational tools to do that. My feelings are that, like an artisan who is a mason, a brick mason, or a carpenter, you can build whatever you want as long as you have the craft or the skill of carpentry or masonry. And I happen to have, first of all, let me just go back and say a little about my own background. I was honed in the fire by some of the toughest folk you would want to meet. Morris has mentioned Wendell Whalum. But I mean, one of my mentors was also Robert Shaw, who could be a tough customer. I was a very fortunate person because my very first performance with the symphony orchestra was with the Atlanta Symphony. But also people like Willis Patterson and T.J. Anderson, William Dawson, people of that sort. But they provided for me something that allowed me early on to realize, while I have this tremendous passion and love for the Western European classical tradition, there are too many other things that we can and should do. Even in the field of classical music, that does not always mean being on the main stage. I don't think enough attention is given. And I think from my early studies at Morehouse and then my early years as a college professor, those kinds of things become increasingly important because we overlook some of the most important elements of the African American musical experience historically. Not enough attention is given to Black art song. Not enough attention is given to preservation of our historical folk music, both what we call heritage music and the contemporization of music. Gospel is a part of that cycle, as well as jazz and R&B, so forth. And so I'm very happy that as I have advised these students, I've wound up with people like Byron Cage or Canton Jones or Carlos Simon, who is going to be the composer in residence at the Kennedy Center next year, or Dr. Bernard Shaw, who is one of the teaching fellows for the International Contemporary Composition Festival in Alba, Italy. They are my guys who are performing with Bruno Mars, or background singers with Michael Jackson and the Luther Vandross and so forth. So they go in different directions. Some of them go into research. One of the primary editors of one of the largest music publishing companies in the country is a Morehouse alum. I think they should be prepared to make choices that don't always involve being on the main stage in performance. There are too many other things to do to wait around, first of all, to be invited to do something in these handful of houses in the United States that could possibly provide a sustainable career. But as Eva Jesse, who was another very tough customer and one of my mentors, as she said, there is so much to do and so little time. So we have to be busy about doing things that is relevant to the field of music that don't only involve classical music performance. So I tell them, make choices for things that they love with the 3 standards. You have to have a passion for it. You must be good enough at it to have success at it. And it ought to be something that is in demand enough to provide you gainful employment. So those are the 3 standards that I use when I'm talking to them about what they should do in terms of making alternative decisions, perhaps for their careers.
Absolutely. I think that your mentioning of Robert Shaw brings up a couple of issues for me. And first is that sometimes it's a matter of making connections on your own, or having someone else to open doors for you. Although I'm from Atlanta, I'm from Georgia, I'm from Macon, and I had spent time living in Atlanta. I had not had the occasion to meet Robert Shaw, and my teacher, Seth McCoy, who was performing with the symphony at one point, said, come down here, meet me here. I want Robert Shaw to meet you and to know who you are and to hear you sing. And sometimes it takes doing that. But the other mention of the symphony brings me to another question that I was going to ask, which is, how can regional arts organizations such as the Atlanta Opera or Kenny Leon's True Colors Theater or the Atlanta Symphony, which I know Rob Morris, you had a connection with, how can they expand their collaborative efforts with other organizations such as the HBCU music departments to create developmental experiences and career building opportunities?
You're asking me that?
Sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to do it. I'm sure Dr. Brown will be open, and I think we have actually done things together with the Atlanta Symphony, if I'm not mistaken. But, we have a culture and a history of doing so in this city. I was an artist in resident for the Atlanta Symphony. I think I was the second one ever to have that position, Russell Tony's being first. And because of such, we were able to reach out to HBCUs. We did master classes with Clark and Morehouse and Spelman. We performed. I think I had at least one performance with Morehouse. And I think we just recently did a Mahler 8 last year where we incorporated Spelman and Morehouse with the Atlanta Symphony. And Robert Spino conducted, and I think we recorded. I don't know if it's been released yet, but we recorded that. So that's one way. I know that Morgan State has the same type of alignment with the National Symphony Orchestra and the Baltimore Symphony, but we've also been talking about, utilizing resources that we have in our industry on the opera side and going into the HBCUs and offering to reach out and to nurture talent. Atlanta Opera did a wonderful job bringing some young singers in from the HBCUs in Atlanta and Georgia State, some of the young African-American singers. It was porgy. It was porgy, but, and that's always been an inroads. But at the same time, they brought some of those young kids into their young artist program and started training them and giving them voice lessons and giving them coachings on languages and styles and that type of thing. So it just takes a desire to do so from each organization and then just making it happen. My friend Russell Thomas right now is out in LA launching a program, the HBCU initiative, where he's going into schools and finding young singers from those schools and bringing them out to LA and working with them. So it's out there now. We've always known that the talent level has been there. It's about nurturing that talent and going out and finding it. And that just comes from having a desire to do so and pulling the trigger,
Dr. Brown?
I wanted to say something on that, and thank you so much. We are very fortunate. Let me first of all say, as a compliment to both the Atlanta Symphony and to the Atlanta Opera, I appreciated very much the kinds of things that they have done in terms of internship programs and providing opportunities for students to do what happened to me. One of the most important early things that happened, and I mentioned Coretta Scott King, was that when the Atlanta, what's called the Guild, Opera Guild of Atlanta, I believe, and the Atlanta musicians, when they used to bring the Metropolitan Opera to town, there were no blacks initially anywhere to be found. But because of Coretta Scott King, for me as a student during my student days, she had lobbied to try and get us into the door to see performances. And I saw some of the most fantastic performances from the Metropolitan Opera stage at the Atlanta Civic Center because of that experience. We wouldn't have been able, without the kinds of open door policies, to get people like Morris over to Morehouse to do master's classes, or Yo-Yo Ma when he came with the symphony. I mean, there's been a tremendous partnership there that I have to certainly pay homage to. Is there more to be done? Yes, absolutely. And what I am hoping that will happen more frequently is that we will see more African Americans in apprenticeship programs or internship programs for the front offices of these companies, are engaged in the managerial lines. Decisions are made quite often with no interjection whatsoever from people of color. I will tell you, Robert Shaw created a significant transition of thought in this city regarding Blacks and classical music. He dared to do some things that this city actually threatened to fire him for. To be quite honest, that was an undergirding circumstance. But Wendell Whalum was the first appointed African American on the board of the symphony. I was a singer in Treemonisha and sang with your teacher, Maurice, with Seth McCoy in that performance, along with Alpha Floyd Brunner and Simon Estes and whatnot. That was because Shaw retained for a second year T.J. Anderson, who was my composition teacher, as the composer in residence to complete the orchestration of the first orchestrated production of Treemonisha. Those kinds of things established a relationship within this city that said, in spite of the resistance of the community to being able to open doors for African Americans, we're going to do this. And Shaw went out on a limb and took great risks. So that began a legacy for this city, and I believe for classical music in our area, that now I'm proud to say a lot of things have happened that are not happening in other parts of the country in terms of these collaborations. We can do more, and we must do more. And programs like this is a beginning in terms of where we can go. But an occasional, when the George Floyd, how can I put this?
Murder.
When this wave of consideration of Black people's place, or people of color, their place in America, when that begins to not be the flavor of the month, and we're no longer at the top of considerations, where do we go? Are we back again to ground zero and nobody listens and nobody cares? We've gone through too many of those. You know, I'm not really the happiest person in the world about a month to look at Black people and then we're put back in the drawer for another 11 months. We have to do more year around to lift up and understand the significance of the contributions and the possibilities for African Americans in classical music.
I know that I can tell from the looks of our panelists that there are opinions about this, and there have been a number of public conversations in the past year on this very topic, especially in the past year. So my question is, how do we ensure that out of this moment comes real institutional and systemic change that is sustainable? And I'll start with Morris Robinson.
I couldn't hear the last part of your question. You said, how do we what?
So how do we ensure that out of this moment comes real institutional systemic change that is sustainable?
Yeah, that's the magical question. I'm with Dr. Brown. He's so intelligent and so articulate, and I'm a little bit less of each and very straightforward. But I've always said that, you know, this thing has an expiration date on it, and I don't want it to happen. I think that in some instances, white guilt has an expiration date. The desire to do things differently has an expiration date. So we have to make sure that it doesn't. And the way we do it is things that we're doing right now. Putting the excellence out front, showing that we're capable, taking advantage of these opportunities, making sure that the granting institutions that write checks for these companies realize that we want to see this level of diversity within your ranks. That's within your hiring practices, on your board, in your administrative staff, and on your stages, or we're not going to support your organization. You don't make it that way. Make it such that this is a necessary thing because it needs to be done. You know, think of all the wonderful voices that we missed out on that could not sing on the Metropolitan Opera stage for years. Think about all the wonderful voices that we didn't hear. Like he said, Robert Shaw was putting Marietta Simpson on stage, taking care of Dr. Hughley Brown. He was one of the first ones to say, you know, I'm going to do it this way because I like the colors of these voices together. He hired based on talent, not based on skin color. So, and that made a huge change. It gave us an avenue. God rest his soul, Michael Levine. with all of his problems, he had many problems, but he hired a lot of black singers to put a lot of black people on. So, we have to now make sure that people understand that we're capable. We have the desire, we got the talent pool, and this isn't just a sideshow until things resume back normalcy. This is something that we need to make sure we keep out front. How to do that, I don't know, but I think the best way to lead is by example of pure excellence and keep putting it out there. So that's how I see it.
Okay, Ronita and Maria, would you like to add to this?
Everybody's scared.
Ronita?
No, no. I agree. I think it's access, education, and reaching back. Like really, if you've been given the opportunity, open the door and have more people in the offices making decisions, have more people who are calling the shots. I don't like performative activism, and I also agree that I don't think this should. I really don't. I don't want it to be like, ooh, it's a sale. All right, let's get this, before this coupon expires. No. We are in the fabric of this nation, and our music, our musicianship has shaped this culture. So I don't feel like we should be relegated to a special time. I don't feel like people should care because the whole world saw a man murdered on TV. It's no. I 100% agree with all the things that have been said, and I don't know the answer, but I do suspect that a lot of it can be resolved through access, through having major visibility of Black artists of color going out there that permeates the culture just as much as pop culture does. We need the knowledge of it to have the desire for it. Like, if you've never eaten pasta, you're not going to desire it because you don't know about it. So, yeah, I don't know the answer. But yeah.
So we know that Black voices matter, and not just on stage. They matter in all aspects of the creative effort. They matter in the orchestra pits. They matter on the podiums conducting. They matter in stage direction and the artistic positions. But sometimes it takes what I teach in my management courses as connecting to the foundational documents of the institution. So if it's not addressed in your mission statement, if it's not addressed in your vision statement, if it's not in your strategic plan, it's not going to happen, because you can't legislate attitude. You can only legislate behavior. And, it's great to put some positions in place, but a single position to address an issue doesn't work unless it's woven into the fabric of the organization. And I think that's what's going to happen if it is sustainable. I hope I didn't cut you off, Maria, if you had a comment.
Oh, okay. I mean, a lot has been said that has to happen. That I completely 100% agree with. Putting African Americans in administrative roles where they get to make decisions, seeking more African Americans to be on the boards of symphonies and opera companies. I think a key word being access. First of all, we have to talk, before we can even get to access for African American singers and musicians, we have to talk about access, period. Because one thing that has always kind of irked me are the elitism in the classical music world, where everything is top secret and who you know. You know, if you're holding auditions, for instance, why are they secret? You know, roles are cast, and you have singers who want the opportunities and who are seeking the opportunities, and everything's done in secret. These auditions are not announced. Back in the day, I mean, the Met definitely had its racial issues historically, but back in the day, one thing that was amazing to me that even the Metropolitan Opera House did, they held cattle call auditions. If you could sing, you could walk up off the street. You could be homeless and walk up in there and sing and audition, and they would hear you. And if you could sing, you got they gave you a shot. You know, also, you know, just blocking access for. We are all on this panel educated in classical music. Sometimes you might be able to sing, but you might not have gone through, you know, bachelor's, master's, doctorate, but you can sing. And, you know, the same opportunities could be given to them. Some of the greatest singers, Luciano Pavarotti, he could not read music. He was not learned in the conservatory, but he could sing, and he's one of the greatest tenors, you know, of the century. Richard Tauber, they got him from the Jewish synagogue. You know, someone at the Met heard about him singing in the synagogue, and they said, "You guys really need to go and hear this guy sing." And they had scouts back then. You know, are you willing to seek out talent in different ways and give open access and consider singers who may not be on an A-list manager list? They may not be managed at all, these singers, but some of them are just as good and just as capable as the ones who are managed. But a lot of times the announcements only go out to A-list managers and the singers on their rosters. And, you know, other singers are looking for these opportunities, and then sometimes they are announced and the information is not clear, or they're not forthcoming. They go to the audition, and by the time you get there, the auditions have already been cast and the main roles have already been cast. And, you know, you have singers spending their last dime and nickel to try to get to these auditions. So first, I think we need to kind of change the way we do things. And if we're going to talk about access, let's really give access. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, these roles are cast with the same singers over and over and over again. Give somebody new a chance. You know, these are the issues, and the elitism and the secrecy, and it's a who you know, and it's a buddy network, and it's just closed off. So if you're going to give access, really give access. Let's face these kind of issues that are blocking African American singers and great singers from having performance opportunities. And another thing I want to say is we have to seek out performing more Black composers and operatic composers. There's more than just Porgy and Bess. There are more African American composers of opera than just Gershwin. You know, we can get more Black opera singers if you cast, if you perform operas that are Black operas other than just Porgy and Bess. That's one way to do it too. And then you knock two birds out with one stone. You've just given a composer an opportunity, and you've also given African American singers, when those operas are about the Black experience, and they're cast in those roles. So there's a lot of little, to me, nooks and cranny decisions that can be made, and conversations that need to be had, but these things are never discussed. So if we're going to talk about access, let's talk about every area of it, and let's start bringing out some of the things that are swept under the rug.
Morris, I know you want to jump in on this.
Yeah, I just want to say I understand exactly what you're saying, Maria Clark, and I like to say this so that people will never forget this whole thing. This is why I believe that the way we do business on this side of things needs to change, because at the end of the day, and I've been sitting at some of these tables now because I've been invited to have a seat. This is an opera business. This is music business. And business decisions oftentimes trump artistic decisions, right? So let's not ever forget, we can't lose sight of that. Business decisions will trump artistic decisions. So when you talk about being on the names of a big roster name versus an unknown, you don't know how many favors they owe that big roster because they bailed them out or they supply them with this singer. You know, these types of things always, this is why you have to look at the infiltration of the top levels of the organization from an administrative standpoint. So you have people in place that are making decisions with everyone's best interest at heart, and the artistic decisions are really what runs true. The other thing is, which kind of ties in with that, is I learned this a long time ago. It was a hard pill to swallow, but the music business isn't always a talent show. Let's say that one more time. It's not always a talent show. The best singers, the best people, if you think in those terms, you'll go crazy, because there are a lot of unjustifiable things being done because of things that we aren't aware of. Which go back to business decisions outranking artistic decisions. And so if we're going to go back to the purity of the art form and having pure access and having pure inroads into things based on talent, then we have to start changing the people that are making those decisions. And that's what, the big picture needs to be changed completely. And you got to get the right people in place. I would love to run an opera company one day. I never thought I would, but the only reason I don't think I will is because I don't think I'd adhere to the business people that are directing me to do things that they want me to do because they're writing checks. I just want to put the best show on stage. I want the best voices, the best actors, the best singers, the best musicians. I don't care if you're orange, green, purple, black, brown, whatever. If we're going to make a great cast, let's make a great cast so we can do. And I think that's just an unpopular opinion right now. So
I think you're absolutely right. And as you have said many times and others have said, it really takes leadership.
Yes.
And until the people who are in leadership positions are inclined to address these issues, the change won't happen. And it connects with a question I was going to ask Ronita to respond to, which is how the pandemic has affected singers tremendously, and the effects of the loss of momentum in careers. And part of the reason I'm asking you this is because I read yesterday in Detroit News that the opera that you scheduled to perform in at the Michigan Opera Theater, the dates have been changed. And it's just another example of how the pandemic continues to affect the lives of Black singers in general, of course, but Black singers in particular. So I want you to talk about that, and then I want all of you to talk about how the public in general can help to support Black singers, Black opera singers, and composers, and what they can do to get the attention of the people who make the decisions. Ronita?
Well, I think the pandemic was devastating to the field as a whole, to performers, to admin. Everyone really suffered losses, and I can only speak personally. It was, I think I sobbed the first gig that went by the wayside was a really important one that I was really looking forward to, and it was a debut here in the United States with Cincinnati Opera, a role that I had always wanted to sing and didn't know if I could until it was proven wrong. And then they just kept coming. The hits just kept coming. I mean, probably had about 4 or 5 really important debuts in the United States and Europe that just they went away, and they disappeared. And when I go back to edit my website, I can see like the little asterisk next to so many gigs canceled due to the global pandemic. It's just devastating. And during that time, I had to I went through a depression and I had to say, all right, what can I do with this time? I can practice, I can learn new skills, I can explore the world of administration, learn about the business of music, learn about the other side, the other side of the table, and not just only focus on performing right now because no one really is. And so it was, although really hard hitting and devastating, it also was a good time to learn about the business, learn about why decisions are made, learn, okay, well, this house is going to do this because they owe this, and this person. They have to perform this, they have to program this because you can't have this, you can't have a chorus, but you can do this. It's always like Morris said, the business trumps the artistic decisions. And just also finding ways to practice your craft, to learn other things. I took up learning the guitar. I took up practicing piano and learning how to tune a piano, learning how to play other instruments to add to my musical knowledge and to add to my, value as an artist in this world. And to your second question, what can people do to support the public? Come see us. I mean, I understand that it's really very difficult now because so many people have had to put the demands of their wallet above, luxury, like cultural experiences. And it's a really very difficult time, but I know many places are slashing ticket prices. Many places are making it accessible. And with the momentum of what's going on in the world with social justice, so many places are actually saying, you know what, this is the time we need to actually appeal to the public and show that the arts really is essential. And we're going to make it easier for you to access it either by streaming or outside performances, making it affordable, because that was another huge thing that I'd always heard. And it ties into sort of the elitist nature that the classical arts has really suffered, is not being able to access it because you can't. You can't afford to go. So I think where we make the art more accessible is now getting the public to come back and to support us. See that? It's a two-way street. It's a two-way street for sure.
So I'd like to go back to something that Maria said or alluded to. I think that it has to do with who's in the seats, and opera companies pay attention to who buys the tickets and what tickets are being bought for what. And I have always tried to help people understand that when the theater fills up for Porgy and Bess, it's not just because the music is glorious, it's because the stage is full of Black people. And they are there to support Black people on stage. So if you find opportunities to put Black people on stage, Black people will buy tickets from whatever culture. When MOT, Michigan Opera Theater, produced an opera that was by an Armenian composer, the theater filled up with Armenian people. They had no idea the city was full of people of Armenian culture. But people want to see themselves on stage. And if they do, if they have the opportunity, they will buy tickets. So I think we have to find ways to demand that we see some representation on stage and behind stage as well. Dr. Brown, would you like to add to some of this part of the discussion?
Sure. Yes. I think what you said, Dr. Maurice, my friend for many years, is very true. It does make a difference who's on that stage. And quite often, even I've had the opportunity to perform in this city, Porgy and Bess, with a number of different casts, and it is not by a Black composer, but you have Black faces, and I hope we do discuss that in some part on the stage. And we've had some other works that have been like Premonition, that have been, ones where Black people in large numbers were on the stage, or we've had a special guest artist to come who was African American. And it is amazing how Black people all of a sudden began to galvanize around those persons and those kinds of productions because they want to see people who look like us on stage. That's just a fact. There's a certain level of relevance there. It has already been treated as though, this the scriptures say, how shall we sing our song in a strange land? Well, I mean, it's already been an area where we've been systematically sort of considered outsiders to this Western European classical music world when it's all play acting. And we don't get the chance to do some of the things where he doesn't look like or she doesn't look like and all of this. And then you turn around and you have nobody who is representing the community on the stage. Why should you expect that Black people would be excited about coming to performances where you don't see anyone who looks like us in the orchestra or on stage or on the roster of those who are in charge of making decisions? It becomes a problematic situation in terms of identity. And getting beyond that identity thing is something that has already sort of festered in a way, because I think it's already created a chasm in terms of the interests of Black people, and they are suspect of things related to classical music and those who attend and how they're going to be looked at even when they show up in the audiences. So a lot of healing has to take place that's not going to be short term. And when people say, well, we tried to do so and so and look, they didn't even come. Well, there's a lot there that has to do with a kind of systemic, I dare say, overlooking, or it's better to say mistreatment, for those who are in the classical music field who are people of color. And we just got to do some healing and mending work there that again goes back to what we do in terms of making decisions in the front offices, in spite of the fact that always the financial considerations have to be made because companies can't go broke and go out of existence. But they do have to be more flexible in terms of understanding that there's a necessity for a balance in what you're putting on that stage and the expectation of the kind of audiences you plan to build.
Absolutely. Morris, did you want to add something to this?
No, I didn't. I don't know if this is, are we at the end at this point? Are we winding down?
I think we are winding down.
Final statement.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, we talk about supporting and how diversity on stage creates diversity in the audience. Well, I can tell you this. Ronita is starring in Three Penny Opera with Atlanta Opera, and she'll be playing this weekend along with Joshua. And Jasmine Habersham is playing in Carmen, and she'll be on stage with the Atlanta Opera this weekend. And all of us are going to be in this unity concert that we're doing on Saturday and Sunday. Sunday is sold out. Saturday is almost sold out. So if you want to come out and support Black artists on stage and show that we make a difference at the box office, come out and support the Unity concert with Atlanta Opera. It's not perfect, but this is one of the companies that's doing a wonderful job of making sure that they are casting based on talent and not ostracizing anyone because of the way they look. And we have that on stage represented this weekend in every show. So come out and support Atlanta Opera in that regard.
Amen. This has been a really wonderful discussion. I think it's tremendous that the focus has been on access, because there are lots of different ways to look at access, whether it's on stage or whether it's access to classical music or access to purchasing tickets. There are a variety of ways of thinking about this regarding access. So I think it's a wonderful topic to shape our discussion. I really appreciate the time that you all have spent with us. I thank all of our audience members for joining us. And I hope that you will buy tickets, come out to the performances, and buy tickets when you see performers who speak to your issues. Seek them out, look for them, and support them by buying tickets.